Cellular respiration. This is the process by which we get energy from our food that we eat and turn it into usable energy for the cell, which is ATP. There are two types of cellular respiration that you need to know about. The first one is aerobic, meaning it requires oxygen, and the second one is anaerobic, which means that it does not have oxygen to use during the process. So cellular respiration is the process by which the energy of glucose is released in the cell to be used for life processes like movement, breathing, blood circulation, etc. Cells require a constant source of energy for life processes, but keep only a small amount of ATP on hand. Cells can regenerate ATP as needed by using the energy stored in foods like glucose. So the energy stored in glucose by photosynthesis is released by cellular respiration and repackaged into the energy of ATP. In other words, this means that animals and any sort of heterotroph has to continually eat food and turn that food into ATP, which is the only source of usable energy for this cell. Therefore, cellular respiration is really important because if you don't have cellular respiration, then there's no ATP and there is no living. Here we can see how photosynthesis and cellular respiration are related to each other. So in photosynthesis, the plant absorbs carbon dioxide and water and turns it into organic molecules and oxygen. We then, in turn, breathe in the oxygen, eat the organic molecules, put them through the process of cellular respiration, and make ATP for life processes and give off carbon dioxide as a result. So you can see that really this is just the cycling of materials and certain atoms over and over again between the heterotrophs and the autotrophs, going back and forth. Respiration occurs in all cells and can take place either with or without oxygen present. So that is the difference between aerobic is with or anaerobic without oxygen. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen. The nice thing about aerobic respiration is that you get a lot of energy out of it. Okay, so the first thing is that it occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. Second, it gives you 36 ATP molecules produced. And as you can see, there's the general formula for aerobic respiration. So as you can see from the equation, glucose plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. And hopefully this equation looks familiar because it's really just the same thing as photosynthesis, but in reverse. So as you can see in this picture, cellular respiration is really broken down into three different steps. There's glycolysis, which happens in the cytoplasm, and then the rest of the steps happen in the mitochondria, which is the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport. Here you can see the 3 steps summarized. So the first step is what we call glycolysis, and as a result of glycolysis, you get 2 ATP. The second step is the Krebs cycle, which results in 2 more ATP, and the third step is the electron transport chain, which makes 32 more ATP for a grand total of 36 ATP. Anaerobic respiration, however, occurs with no oxygen. Okay, this is what happens when you run out of oxygen, or when you are baking something, or you are making beer or wine or anything like that. Okay, is anaerobic respiration, which we also call fermentation. And in this process, much less ATP is produced. It is not as effective as aerobic respiration is. Alcoholic fermentation occurs in bacteria and yeast. So the process used in baking and brewing industry, the yeast actually produces carbon dioxide gas during fermentation to make the dough rise and give bread its holy, fluffy texture. So in this case, we can see that glucose becomes ethyl alcohol plus carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP. Lactic acid fermentation, on the other hand, is what happens in humans in our muscle cells. So when lactic acid is produced in the muscles during rapid exercise, The body cannot supply enough oxygen to the tissues, so this causes a burning sensation in the muscles. And that's what happens as you guys start running. You just can't breathe fast enough to keep up with the oxygen demand of each individual cell. So as you can see in this reaction, glucose becomes lactic acid plus carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP. That is way less ATP than the 32 that you get out of aerobic respiration. So we can see that cellular respiration happens when we take glucose and we break it down in order to turn it into ATP. Either way, it's going to start out in glycolysis to be broken down. Then it will undergo aerobic respiration to make 36 ATP if oxygen is present in your mitochondria. And if oxygen is not present, then you will make lactic acid, or other bacteria can make alcoholic fermentation. Now, this is really important for you guys to remember. Both plant and animal cells carry out the final stages of cellular respiration in mitochondria. Both plant and animals. Even though plants can make their own food, they still have to use cellular respiration to turn that food into ATP. And we happen to just eat the plants and use their pre-made glucose in cellular respiration to make our own ATP. So all in all, cellular respiration is how organisms turn food into ATP energy. The process starts in the cytoplasm and finishes in the mitochondria. It is essentially the reverse of photosynthesis. And without oxygen, cellular respiration has to move to fermentation, which produces much less ATP.